Hello, welcome back to the Your Everyday Strength podcast. My name is Josh Sternberg, and if you're just joining us here for the first time today, thank you very much. If you are returning, also thank you very much. Today, we have a wonderful guest with us, the lovely Meghan Brazh. Meghan Brazh, sorry, we just went over this.
That's
I always
okay.
butcher that. Meghan Brazh. So we've already started on a strong note. And I know for a fact we're going to have a really good conversation today because I was fortunate enough to do some work with Meghan last week. And since then, it's like I've really sat with quite a lot of what we did, and we'll get into a little bit more of that today. So it won't spoil what she does and everything like that. But it was one of those like moments where you hear about a particular thing and you're like, oh, I don't really know what that's about, but it sounds kind of cool, but you're not really sure. And then when you actually do it and you sit there and you actually sit with it afterwards, you're just like, wow, okay, this is like, everybody knows I'm a bit of a woo-woo guy, and anybody listening to this today, come into it with an open mind, listen freely, and I guarantee you will take something from it. So Meghan, please welcome. Thank you very much for being here.
Thank you, Josh. Lovely to be here.
And run an intro. Tell us who you are, what you do, all the rest of it.
Yeah, so as I was growing up in terms of what I do, I guess you'd probably say seeking would probably be the best way to describe it. So I found that I was sort of seeking in terms of when I was going through life and finding that you're getting yourself into the same patterns, the same programs, meeting the same people, different faces. And I couldn't really understand why. And that just sort of led me to seek throughout my life. And it's been happening for a long time in terms of, just, I guess you'd sort of call it the consciousness, higher consciousness space, wanting to get a bigger understanding, which also led me to going into more of the personal side of things. So, my family history, why I was the way that I was, essentially, which led me to astrology. And through that, it was sort of what it gave me was the ability to look into subconscious patterns and programs that I didn't have the ability to understand before, which was really helpful to me. And then essentially I went on a pretty big journey, which I feel started quite young. And then as I got older, just seeking, reading a lot of books, as we all do, and then found myself, I sort of came across plant medicine, which helped me a lot in answering a lot of the questions as well. And with that, I just wanted to be able to help people in terms of if they were feeling confused in their life, if they were feeling like they were having the same situation, finding that they were repeating the same patterns and not really understanding why, sort of running on programs that they couldn't work out. And I just find with astrology, it's a really good way to go into what's happening in the subconscious, what has come up in terms of family, this kind of thing that then allows people to dig in a bit further into what is running these programs, essentially.
I really like that. And I want to clarify because you used a reference last week when we were talking about astrology, because people will hear the word astrology and previously my mind defaults to like the TikTok tarot card readers. I know I'm in some shit if those TikTok tarot card readers are popping up like constantly. I'm like, man, I'm going through it. It's time to book back into my therapist now. But you mentioned pop astrology versus basically real astrology. And that to me was like, I've done a lot of investigation in a lot of this stuff and everything like that. And that to me was like the first time I'd ever heard it referenced in that way. And I really liked it because I know for sure there can be like that negative connotation where you'll have the astrologers pop up and they're like, this is going to be the luckiest week of your life. You're going to find the love of your life on Wednesday. And it's, they don't find the love of their life. And then they're just kind of like, well, that was a lie. So I'm never going to listen to any of it again.
Yes.
So give like people at home just a little bit more of an insight into what you determine like is astrology and what, versus pop astrology and things like that.
Yeah. So it is. So astrology has very much been confused with fortune telling as well. So a lot of people, when they think of astrology, they think they're going to be sort of told their future and their fortune. And I do come from a place where I believe there's space for everything, and there's in no way judgment in terms of how people choose to use astrology. The challenge with astrology is that it's become sort of simplified. And it's really used to explain certain, often certain personality traits. So, if you're a Taurus, you like to eat food. Or if you're a Gemini, you're two-faced, which is really just not even scratching the surface of essentially what astrology is really. And when you're looking into someone's birth chart, a lot of people don't really understand astrology in the sense of, especially psychological astrology, in terms of looking at the birth chart. And I'll just give you an example with the ascendant sign. Well, I guess just to go back, most people really, when they think about astrology, most people really only know, well, I should say many people really only know their sun sign. I'm a Cancer, I'm a Taurus, this kind of thing. That's sort of the popular explanation. But what is starting to come out more now is your ascendant sign, your moon sign, and just to give a bit of an example, the ascendant sign being what you could also call your birth sign. So the conditions that were around you when you were being born, also in the womb, that kind of thing as well, and what is essentially going to set you up in terms of how you're going to view coming into the world. So we spoke about that in our session as well, Josh.
Mm.
So, and in terms of like the moon sign, what if I want to look at your relationship with your mother or the caregiver when you were first born, the person that nurtured you, then I'm going to look at your moon sign and I'm going to see what was happening around the time that you were born, but also following through the stages of your life as well. So it's a lot more than just, as I say, I'm a Sagittarius and I like to travel.
Oh, 100%. That's become evident for me over the last couple of years, the more I've looked at this sort of thing. And when we discussed it last week, that predominantly I had focused more on the sun. Like, I'm obviously a Cancer, I'm born in June, and I kind of knew my moon and my rising, but I hadn't necessarily really looked into too great a detail about what they actually represent. And for anyone who may be like a little bit skeptical or anything about this, I get it. I do. It can sound strange at times, some aspects of this work, and I'm sure you've dealt with that yourself, with people being hesitant or reluctant to listen and things like that. But
Yes.
for me, going into all these situations with like an open mind, and when Megan and myself were actually talking, she was basically telling me things about my childhood that couldn't have possibly known purely whilst reading my birth chart. And
Mm.
there was a lot of, things about my personality and different aspects of my life and different aspects of who I actually am as a person, some of which I've never shared online. I'm a very open person. I feel like I share quite a lot about my life, myself, my past, my history, all the rest of it. But there are still aspects of my life that I keep to myself. And without ever actually really having much of an interaction before this, Megan was actually able to discuss these things with me in like quite great detail. I was mind blown
Mm.
at first. I was just like, holy shit, like this is cool. Like I love this sort of stuff anyway. And I'm a very big believer in all of the spiritual realm and the way in which it all ties in. And I
Mm.
love the term that you used at the start, which was just
Yes.
seeking within yourself, really. And that's a really big thing. I had a conversation with somebody about this yesterday, and we were essentially discussing that everything within our lives essentially ties back to us. The better we can understand ourselves, the better we can emotionally regulate, the better we can actually sit with and understand why we are how we are, the better we are then able to show up in the world and, quote unquote, better people we are able to be.
Mhm. And that is, I think if I had to say anything about astrology, it's understanding yourself and starting, we're in a world of information. Now, I've put this up before where we're really seeking information out there. And this is not a new thing. This is in, any esoteric book that you're reading. We're constantly seeking outside of ourselves. And a lot of the time we're handing our authority over as well in the sense of I want you to tell me the answers. Or I want if I go on, we've got so much opportunity now with ChatGPT, Google to look up any information that we want. And sometimes we see advice that's working for somebody else, but it just doesn't seem to work for us. And what the birth chart allows us to do is sort of give us an insight as to why. And then once you sort of become more aware of yourself, what can be really fun with the birth chart is then getting to know and understanding others as well. So, especially with your partner, if you're behaving in a certain way, or, your beliefs or the way that you think, the way that you feel, what your natural instincts are, the way that you're going to naturally respond to things is going to be most of the time quite different to your partner. So if you have that ability to understand yourself, and then you can also start to understand where somebody else is coming from their perspective as well. And it just helps because, of course, we're all here to learn from each other. We're all reflecting each other. We're all sort of, as Ram Dass says, we're all here to walk each other home. So if we can understand that and as I say, and also sort of understand our energy to use it to our benefit as well. So if we're quite a fiery person, or you and I spoke about high intelligence person, are we using our abilities in the best possible way as well, so that it's
Mm.
not detrimental to us is another.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's so much benefit to that. And something you touched on briefly there is a lot of people will look outside themselves and almost hand over their authority to external sources rather than looking within. And as a part of the conversation I actually had with this person yesterday, we came to the conclusion that we're essentially, that's how we're taught to live from a very young age. From the moment we're born, we give up our power to our parents. They do
Mhm.
everything for us. They control everything, what we do, what we wear, what we eat, when we sleep, every aspect of our lives, they control. We're then put into an environment, whether that's kindergarten or childcare or whatever the case might be to begin with, where we're
Mhm.
essentially taught, this is how you learn, this is when you eat, this is when you sleep. We have no authority for a very, very, very long time. Like, we're not considered adults until 18 in Australia, older in some countries. We're technically stripped of our authority until we're classed as adults. And one day you're 17, you have no authority. The next day you're 18, you need to know how to do everything in this world for yourself, how to do it all. And I know
Yeah.
that this is something that the schools miss the mark on quite a lot.
Yeah.
And I don't necessarily think it's a lot of our teachers' faults, because a lot of the time teachers are just students who were never taught the same things either. And if it starts from the top down, like if we can teach teachers how to better emotionally regulate, because I'm sure we've all dealt with it in the past. We've got that angry, snappy, fiery teacher who can't communicate well, can't tolerate kids when they're being naughty. They've probably been doing the job for 40 years past where they should have retired. And they're unwilling to come from a place of understanding, like understanding why kids are the way they are. And even myself, for example, like I was basically told from prep onwards that I was just a naughty, disruptive kid. It's like,
Yeah.
but I, but at the same time, I was very intelligent. I was very smart. I generally had the highest grades in all of my classes for reading, writing, comprehension, sport, all of it.
Yeah.
And instead of focusing on that aspect of things, I mean, like, okay, well, he's clearly not a bad person. Like, how can we actually help this? Which some teachers did take the time to, and I understand it. It's a hard task when you've got a class of 25 to 30 kids per class. You factor in 4 to 5 classes in your grade alone. Like, that's a lot
Yeah.
of kids.
Yeah.
But it really does start at the top down, and like the more people can actually start to dive into themselves, the better everyone will start to be as a collective.
Absolutely. And I have to say, Josh, with that, I was that kid too. So when it came to school, I was that kid. And the consequence of that for me was that, I've worked out that for me, a lot of it was boredom. And I was quite distracting in classes. And I sort of worked out that I did that just to create some sort of activity around me because I was just so bored. But unfortunately, the consequence of that was that I sort of spent my life not thinking I was very bright. And then I got into corporate environments, and all of a sudden it was like, "Hey, Meg, how do you spell this?" Or, "Hey, Meg, how do you do that?" And it was sort of like, me, like, you're asking me, because I just never had, for me, it was, I sort of gave up on school because it didn't really work for me in the way that I learnt. And there is a really famous story about that. I can't remember the dancer's name, but she was taken to see a psychologist, psychiatrist. It is a very famous dancer. And the mum was saying, sort of like, what's wrong with her? Like, tell me what we need to do. She's struggling a lot. I'm obviously shortening the story. But luckily, they were able to see that they actually said she's a dancer. She needs to move to think. So, and she ended up
Mm.
becoming a really famous dancer. So, unfortunately, these days it's like, well, they're not fitting in his whatever kind of medication to get the child to fit in, not realizing that they actually just don't learn through that process. So to me, it would be very beneficial for parents to also be aware of what the way that their kids process and the way that their kids learn, and uh, that can that can have a big impact on, it's that quote from Einstein, every child is a genius, but if you judge a kid's ability, is it to swim? Or if you judge a kid's
Oh,
ability to
if you judge a fish's ability to climb a tree,
tree, it'll spend its life
it
thinking
will
it's
grow up
big.
thinking it's yeah, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
With that then, because I've definitely thought about this over the time. What would your suggestion be to actually start that process? Because exactly as you said, like the ability to identify, everybody learns so differently. And
Mm,
we've been able to find that out. Some people are kinesthetic learners, some people learn practically, they learn by doing, they learn by seeing,
yes.
they learn by hearing. There's so many different ways that people learn. I know that when I was in school, for me to actually concentrate and focus on my work, I would listen to music. But of course, headphones are banned in schools, and I would be
Um,
torn apart or sent to the office so frequently. But what they didn't understand is when I was listening to music, I was the most locked in I'd ever been. All my
mm,
work would get, I could sit there in English with music playing while reading our books. And the teacher would, I remember one of the teachers in grade 9, she straight up said, she's like, you will never be able to learn that way. You're just doing it to be like disruptive. You're doing it to do this. You want to cause a scene, blah, blah, blah. And then I got the highest marks in the grade for my ability to comprehend and describe exactly what was happening within the book and understand it and articulate and all the rest of it. And I was like, it's not that I'm trying to be disruptive. This is just how I learn. I'm blocking out distractions
and you knew
and
that.
I'm able to focus. I knew it internally, but I didn't understand how to articulate that. I didn't understand
Articulate
that.
it.
I was like, oh, okay, well, this, I don't know why, but this helps me. And music's always been something that I've used my entire life. Like there's never a time I don't really have music to some degree playing.
Yeah.
It's just always helped to regulate that. So how would you say that we can actually get the ball rolling on people better understanding learning styles in others?
Yeah, look, it is hard because obviously our system is very much, well, there's two factors. I mean, our society very much is based on intelligence. So it's sort of like, and schools are set up that way as well. So that is seen as sort of the paramount in terms of our schooling systems. I always sort of would love to see schools based on children's abilities and what they're really good at. And us being able to, as people, like there are cultures in the world that when children are born, they almost like they associate an archetype with the child because they understand that the child might be more a fiery temperament. They understand that this child is a highly sensitive child. And then what we do is we sort of, there's, highly intelligent child, and we put them all into the one place, and we say, survive in this place. And look, there are some children that love school. There are some children. The other thing is, of course, with children, there does need to be some sort of structure.
Mm.
Especially if there is a high energy child, they do need to be able to learn how that energy can be used more effectively. In the birth chart, that's sort of where Saturn comes in. So there does need to be some sort of boundaries in terms of, but it needs to be in a healthy way. So someone needs to be able to see that child and be like, wow, we've got a really fiery child on our hands. How do we teach this child to use that in a effective way? So it doesn't just mean letting the child just run wild with it, because of course that has consequences as the child grows up. but it's being able to see it in them and actually and allow them to use it in a way that's beneficial. So, get them to, use it in a place that it's not just exhausting for them either. So, what I mean, in a really ideal world, we would be looking at children and we would be aware of sort of their temperaments and where they shine and where they sort of don't feel as confident. And we would be maneuvering things around that.
Mm.
We would be making sure that they had the foundation to use that in the right way.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I think that's a really good way to look at it, and I get it too from the other perspective. Like I know for a fact I've got teachers who do listen to this. I'm friends with quite a lot of teachers, and I can see why it would be a difficult thing to do because as I already said, like there's 25, 30 kids in a class. To try and form a close enough interpersonal relationship with each individual child to understand how they show up, how they learn, how they do these things isn't necessarily the easiest thing in the world. But
Yeah.
if by the time they get into school, they're, around the ages of 5 or 6, by the time they start prep, there should definitely be a way that even through the kindergarten system or preschool system or whatever system they run, to actually be able to start to individualize that and almost come to school prepared, ready to go, rather than, oh, you had nap time at 1 p.m., now you don't get nap time at all, and you have to survive a whole day of learning, and you actually don't know how to learn very well because you're a really active kid, or you're a very quiet person. You love learning, but you can't learn in a distracted environment, or whatever each individual
Yeah.
person is and does.
Yeah.
It would it would be amazing to be able to see that, and I think we would see a hell of a lot more kids given merit for who they are as people instead of being jammed into a box that just doesn't fit them.
Yeah, I completely agree. And as I say, having gone through that myself, um, I there's a movie, X-Men, where he sets up a school. I don't know if you've ever seen it, but
Oh yeah,
yeah, yes, with the school, Charles Xavier School, and
yeah.
they've all got these powers, and they've all got these powers and abilities, and essentially the basis of the school is to help them use them properly. So giving them that foundation to allow them to use it in a way that's beneficial for them. Because unfortunately, and you hear about people talk about it as well, people are learning now. I hear people, I've seen videos of them saying, I always thought my sensitivity was a really bad thing. But now that I'm growing up, I'm realizing that sensitivity is actually a superpower. I can help other people and, I can sort of gauge what people need prior to them maybe even knowing. I can be there. Whereas again, we put such an emphasis on intelligence in our society as well. So these kind of things that kids have, also sort of that bravery, fieriness, that kind of temperament, that's not really rewarded in our school environments. But we need that in the world. We need all of it in.
Mm,
So it is, it is a challenging thing in terms of teachers, but I guess I would think, to me, I feel like parents need to just become a bit more aware of, even if you were to do your child's birth chart when they come into the world, and then also have a look at your birth chart and how you relate to your child as well. Sometimes you'll see a child that comes into the family, an example, nearly everyone they might process things more from a mindset mentality, and then you'll have one kid that comes through and they're incredibly sensitive and emotional. And that can be really difficult for a child who comes in
mm,
and they're highly sensitive and everybody around them processes things through the mind. So, but if you know that about your child, if you know that your child is highly sensitive, then that can give you a bit of a space to work with in terms of the way that you relate to them.
yeah. I, where do the parents start that process then? Because I already said it before that, it's a top-down approach. Teachers need to learn it so they can pass it on
Mm.
to kids. Parents need to learn it so they can pass it on to kids, because the best way to resolve all of this is, again, start from the top, work our way down. The more children that we have who have already had parents who have done these things, the better they're going to be able to come through the system, and then they're going to be able to pass that on to their kids, and so on and so forth. And that's how the flow on effect works. But where say, for example, there's parents listening to this, where do they start? What is the actual process to start this?
Well, I would say so. As soon as you have a child, you will have access to their. So you just need their birth date, where they were born, and their birth time. So just be aware. Obviously, that's not going to be your focus at that moment of exactly what time they were born, but just making sure that you keep the records of the timing that they were born, and then that gives you an ability to have a bit of an idea. But one thing I will say, I would actually recommend for mums to keep a journal around the birth and around being pregnant and around the birth as well, because there is a very big part of the puzzle in terms of what happened when the baby was in the womb and also when they were born. So the way that you were born will have quite a big impact, but also anything that happened in the womb can have an impact in terms of our lives and the way that we sort of enter the world and what we expect to see in the world as well. So for mums, it is a really good idea to keep a journal when you're going through that, and just being as honest as possible in terms of maybe what you're feeling. You know, when you get older, you realize that we sort of, if you're a first time mum, you might be a little bit scared going through that process. It might not just be all feelings of bliss, or you might be in a situation where you might find that you're in financial hardship while you're going through a pregnancy, or things that might not look like that when the child is now 10. As an example, you might have financial hardship, but by the time the child's 10, you might have a lot of money, but the child comes through having a lack mentality, or feeling like they'll never, like, money's a hard thing to come by. So it helps if you can understand where that pattern potentially comes from as well,
Mm.
because there's a very big
And for
part
the
of our life. Oh, sorry.
no, no, so I was just gonna say for the parents themselves, like if we forego them even having children right now, let's say somebody
Yeah.
wants to become a parent in the future or something like that, like
Yeah.
where as an adult can we or can they start the process of looking in? Is it still straight away start with the birth chart and you can kind of like build upon it from there, would you say? Or what other sort of processes would you recommend around that?
In terms of before they have a child, or not even
Yeah,
factoring the child,
just in general,
just
just as adults,
in
even
general.
even
Yeah.
factor in not having children at all, like grown adults
Yeah.
as well as a whole. I'm sure everyone could be
Yeah.
better, like better.
Yeah, so if you're feeling that way, then it's definitely a good idea to start, and as we mentioned at the beginning, to look into yourself a little bit more in terms of, we go through these patterns where we realize, okay, I'm seeing the same thing, and we've all seen this with friends, where you'll be sitting with a friend and you're like, I've seen this pattern before, and you may not feel comfortable to mention that. But you may also have known your friend long enough to have a bit of an idea of where that pattern's coming from. So if we're, as an adult, if we're finding, as I mentioned, sort of that we're repeating things, or we're experiencing even people or relationships in the same way, it's a really good idea just to see because we work on the fact of the internal reflecting the external. So your external life reflecting what's happening internally. And sometimes that can be hard to jog until it's happened a couple of times. And you start to go, no, this is actually, I've met this person like
Mm,
many, many times throughout my life. And what are they showing to me? Remembering the mirror, what are they reflecting back to me that I'm not quite grasping here? And that's where the birth chart can be really helpful, because so as an adult, if you know your birth time, you know where you were born, you can still do a birth chart without knowing your birth time. It just won't show you just won't know your ascendant sign or where exactly the houses are placed.
yeah.
So
So start with basically you can start with the birth chart as like a little bit of a foundation, and then that
definitely.
can dive into further aspects of who you are. And obviously we went through mine last week, and there was aspects of that that you explained to me that I was like, wow, that's actually really interesting. I've never thought about it. And there was other aspects that I was like, holy shit, yeah, that's me to a T. And then that has then since allowed me to, the things that I didn't necessarily know as much or know as in greater detail, I'm like, cool, I can actually use that now. I can go and look into that a little bit further. Or, oh, cool, that's actually something that I can work on in the future, or stuff like that as well, right?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
but it's just
Because
having that foundation.
very much, because it's also, as I say, it's also about knowing how to use certain energy correctly as well, or and I don't like the word correctly, sorry, but to put it in a place that may be a bit more beneficial. If you're finding that, if you're someone that might find that you're excess, or you're finding that you're going outside and you're getting into little fights here and there, or you're finding that, that kind of is a signal that you might be not utilizing that kind of fiery energy in a way that's beneficial. If you're finding that you're just bored, some people, I don't think some people realize how boredom can play a part as well into their lives if they're not sort of, if they're living in it. So another thing in society that you'll see a lot is people often will choose safety over, exploring, more of their abilities or possibilities. Sometimes,
Mm.
especially if you've come from a place of a lack, kind of, where maybe money wasn't easily available to you as a child, or, so sometimes we go through life and we actually choose the safe path. But what can happen with that is that just blatant boredom can follow from that. And what can also happen with blatant boredom is feeling very tired all the time. So it's just also giving a person the ability and the confidence to be able to see that there is a bit more that they can tap into, but they can do it slowly. They don't have to run out overnight and start a completely new life. They can just put in slow habits or something that just gets them to maybe utilize and people usually know as well. They usually have a bit of an idea of either where they want to go or their dreams, or, something in mind, but they just might be a little bit scared to take the next step.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sure every single person at some point, anybody listening to this right now, will have at some point been scared or not necessarily known the next step to take, despite the fact they know they need to take one.
Mm,
And like that's also a really scary thing. Like inaction causes so much more anxiety than it needs to.
mm. Yeah.
Oftentimes people will get caught up in they have these ideas, plans, goals, etc. And they focus so heavily on the big overarching goal that they don't necessarily just look at the small, intricate little steps that it can take to get there. And learning yourself better can quite literally be as simple as reading a book, watching a podcast or listening to a podcast, or doing a birth chart reading, going to see a psychologist and just being like, why am I this way? Like,
Yeah.
this pattern has shown up quite a lot of times. Or the one thing you said that I really loved was it's the same person with a different face.
Yes. Yeah.
That like heavily resonated with me because I'm like, I can see the patterns of people who have been in my past. And I'm like, when you boil down the details of it, it truly is just, it's the same thing repeating over and over again. And you don't necessarily think about it in that particular moment in time. And I know when I was a little bit more closed minded to a lot of this stuff, I would never have looked at those details and been like, oh, well, this is X, this is Y. It's like, no, this is its own thing. This is its own thing. These are two separate things. And it's like when you break it down and look at it collectively, you're like, oh, actually, that's the exact same thing. Someone else
Yeah.
is the face of it for this round.
Yeah. Correct. Correct. And then it,
It,
it, it really opens a path, doesn't it?
absolutely. It's what, yeah, I'm probably a little bit differently wired to some people. And I know there's a lot of people who do listen to this podcast who are actually very, very similar minded to myself, which is fantastic. It's probably why they continue to listen week in, week out. But I am somebody who, if I do find something that I don't necessarily love about myself in regards to some aspect of my personality or the way in which I show up or whatnot, I will try and dive a little bit deeper and figure out why I'm that way and then how to correct it.
Mhm.
Whereas a lot of people are too scared or potentially, like, for lack of a better term, a little bit naive to the fact that if there is aspects of themselves that they don't necessarily love, they can confront them and they can actually make a change towards something different.
Yeah.
But it takes radical honesty with yourself is probably the first one, and being willing to look at like some depth of yourself that you may not necessarily find attractive,
Mm.
but is necessary for growth.
Yeah. Yeah. That's 100%. And sometimes it will take something in our lives or a person to open that up, in terms of the starting the journey of sometimes a person will come into your life and they'll really, really open up a path for you, and it won't necessarily feel nice, but it it will allow you to see things from a different perspective. And this
Mm.
is essentially learning from the birth chart as well, that sometimes you will have a trigger point. Another way, on a side note of just explaining the birth chart, is sort of like your clock. So you're going through your process of learning, and the birth chart is showing you that timing. So it's like your clock in terms of, being able to see what, so I guess when I'm saying that, I'm meaning like trigger points. You can often see them in the chart. And when that happens, what can follow that is different perspectives. So even, we spoke about the fact that when you turn around that age of 30, there is a very big astrological period that matches with that age. But essentially now we're starting to take stock in that period of our lives as well. We're starting to
Mm.
become more aware, and time itself is starting to become more finite. When we're teenagers in our 20s, time isn't, we've got endless amounts of time. So now so we can see these patterns and things happening. So whether it's a person that comes into our life that triggers that off, whether it's a situation that triggers it off, it can be many different things, but that can then allow us to go on that path of looking into ourselves a little bit more as well.
Yeah. What would you say to someone who's really fucking scared of doing that? Really scared at looking into themselves because they're worried about what they're going to see?
Well, the tricky thing is that's not always a conscious thing. So sometimes people will say I'm scared to tap in. I have heard that before, absolutely. I will always just say start very, very slowly. It could it, if you just want to start, like a place to start, if you're finding that you're struggling in a certain, whatever area it might be, just start asking yourself some questions. Start, if you've got fears, if you have trouble in a relationship setting, just start asking some questions around that. It doesn't have to be, we're very, in this society as well, we really like to go big. We think, just do it, get it out and get it done. And it's like, absolutely, that works for people. There is a place for that. But with some people, it just needs to be very, very small in terms of their journey and the way that they do it. And as somebody who does birth charts, that I would be sitting with someone and I would be recognizing that in the person as well.
Mm.
It would be you'd go a bit slower with that person as well if you could see they were fearful of
Yeah,
diving
having
in.
someone there is having a secondary person there is always, it's so undervalued. And we definitely, as adults especially, we try and almost internalize everything to our own detriment, really. One of the books I'm rereading at the moment, School of Life, like, by Elaine de Botton, essentially talks about how just the simple act in having somebody with you whilst you work through a problem makes such a massive difference. Anybody who's ever struggled in their life, a simple conversation, a simple "how are you?" has such a profound effect on that individual who may have otherwise wanted to try and hide away from that and like shy away from that to a degree.
Absolutely, because how often in our lives do we have people really having the ability to stop and listen completely, but also
Mm.
people that you don't always already have a thread with? So, if you're in a relationship with your partner, you could say something that's quite triggering for them. You may not have even be meaning to, you were just expressing yourself, but because there's that connection there, so there's not that place in terms of just being able to sit with someone and they don't want, not wanting anything from you, not having any thread with you. They're just giving you a complete space to say what you want to say, and that's
Mm.
quite a big thing. as well. Just to have someone to sit with you in that time and just really listen to you, I think makes a
Oh,
really big difference.
absolutely. Absolutely. It's one of the things is in that same book that he does discuss around psychotherapy and psychologists, psychiatrists, counselors, all these different types of people who there's very few times when anyone moves. And this is, again, it's probably a little bit more of an internalized thing that we sort of set up this predisposition that if we're talking to someone and we might be struggling ourselves, that we have to also instinctively ask how that person is and
Yeah.
almost be like, we can't dump this on you without taking something back, despite the fact we may not be able to hold that. So because we can't hold it, I'm not going to talk to you because I can't handle what you've given me.
And there's guilt there sometimes, right? So as
Oh,
well, it's like
absolutely.
you go away from that situation, you've just sat there and you've said how you feel, and then you walk away and you go, "Was that did I just tell my friend too much?" Like, I don't want them to feel like they have to hold that. I mean, of
Mm,
course, we do need to have friendships that we can share how we feel, that's really important. But, there can be a space that when you're specifically going there to just be able to purely, say what you wanna say and not have to walk away from that space feeling like you had to give something else in that environment, that can be really, really helpful.
oh, it's incredibly powerful. And just on the topic of kind of being able to communicate that to people, there's something I've had to deal with a lot recently with, and anybody who's listened to this knows now, but with everything that's been going on with my dad, with his cancer diagnosis and just general life as a whole, one of the main people that I've lent on throughout this entire process, and I'm very, very fortunate for this, is my mum. I've spoken to her more about all of this than anyone. I've told her probably more of my feelings about it than I'd even mentioned to my psychologist at certain aspects. And in the same time, everybody has their own lives. They're all dealing with their own things. And there've been times where mum has come to me and she's talked to me about something, and I've had to honestly say, I actually can't hold this right now. Like I really, I'm very sorry. I can't, like, I know you've been there for me massively, and I'm forever grateful for that. I can't necessarily hold this right now, but I will come back to you when I can. And that was hard. It's my mother. It's a very hard conversation to have. I'm fortunate enough that we have a relationship where I can do that. And that
Yeah.
hasn't come easily. That has come through trials and tribulations and more arguments than you could probably think. For us to be able to have that relationship where I can say to her, I can't hold this right now, but I can come back to you when I can. And then I have been able to go back and do that when I've been able to do it. And if anything, it hasn't caused any sort of like disarray or anything like that. It's probably strengthened our bond because she then understands that when I do come back to her and talk to her about it, that I am 100% in a space where I can both hold that and show up.
Yeah. You
I
can
think,
give your full attention.
yeah, absolutely. And it is hard. Like it's hard. I've had over the years, especially working as a coach, one to one with a lot of people. One of the
Yeah.
hardest boundaries I've ever had to set is telling my clients when they've overstepped in a particular moment in time. That is like, as a coach who prides himself on being able to show up for his clients wholly 100% and be able to handle things and hold space for them when they need it, to turn around and say to a client, hey, I actually can't hold, like, I can't hold this right now. Instead of messaging me, you need to actually message me and say, hey, do you have the capacity for this right now?
Mm. Mhm.
If it's more of a personal thing, if it's something just my program's not working today or it's a nutrition thing, it's like, cool, okay, we can address that. But if it's something a little bit heavier or deeper, which I find that a lot of my clients who do work with me feel very comfortable in sharing some things that they maybe wouldn't share with other coaches, which I love. It's one of my favorite parts of my job. But to teach them in a really, really polite and respectful way that, like, I can't necessarily hold the space for that right now, but I will absolutely do so.
Mm.
I just need to, like, I'm a human being as well. I'm a
Yeah.
human being. I'm going through my own things.
Yeah.
It's fucking hard. But if you can manage to actually start to articulate that to people, and you might not be a coach, you might not be working with clients, but if you can articulate it to anybody, they will never look down on you for that. It will actually probably increase their strength and like their trust in you and their
Yeah.
respect for you.
Yeah. And also, rather than them telling you incredibly personal things and knowing that you're not quite there with them or able to hear it or able to sit with it, that can be quite, it's jarring for somebody if they are in a really, personal situation. And rather than you're able to say, I'm not able to actually hold this right now, um, just being honest and having that ability with people, or even saying, hey, I know someone that could help you.
Mm.
If, but just as long as people, yeah, know that it means something, and there is that honesty, as I say, as opposed to half listening. If you know that you can't give that
100%.
space, half listening when someone's going through something can be very hurtful for people,
Yeah,
so
we've all probably been through that as well, right? We know when the other person can't actually hold
hold
what we're giving them in that moment, and you feel the disconnect. And then you're like, "Oh, are they judging me? Oh, this person's not safe anymore." It's like this person might be the safest person you have in your life, but they almost so might have had one of the worst things that's ever happened to them happen this morning, and they just physically cannot hold it right now. It
Yeah,
doesn't take away anything from them as a human being. It actually probably makes them more human. But if they're not able to articulate that and explain it to you or to someone, and I think a big thing too, and this is something that's taken me so many years. Everybody does. We take everything so personally.
mm,
It's as if everybody goes around and we're as important in everyone else's stories as we are in our own.
mhm,
So
mhm.
anytime anything is done against us or we perceive it to be either an attack or a disrespect or something like that, we take it so personally.
Mm. Yeah, and there's sort of, again, because, well, it's interesting, right? Because if you've never been listened to as a child, you were never listened to. That can be more upsetting when you do try and reach out to someone and they're not listening again, because it's reaffirming that pattern of I'm not important enough to listen to. And of course, we sometimes have that pattern ingrained within ourselves of, well, I'm not important enough to listen to, so I'm going to bring people into my space that can't hold me in terms of being listened to.
Mm,
So sometimes we don't realize it, but we're just playing out another pattern and another program, because life is always a delicate balance between the give and take, right? It's always trying to work out what level can I expect my friend to be able to hold what I'm going through right now, and what level can I hold what they're going through in the give and take, and can I drop everything to be with them in this moment? What am I expecting of them? Expectations are another one. So it is always a bit of a delicate dance with that. But
mm,
that's where knowing yourself can be incredibly powerful, because if there is a pattern where you expect all throughout your life that's been shown to you that no one will listen to you, that can be really important to become aware of. Because just going back to what you're saying is, and taking things really personally, it will be quite hurtful in going through that. But if we're aware of it, then we can actually do something about that.
yeah, it's bringing that awareness to it. I think is a really big thing, and you can only bring awareness by sort of going into the weeds a little bit, and even just reading, the overview of a birth chart and understanding that aspect of things and different whether people want to believe in astrology or not, that is okay. It is entirely up to the
Mm,
individual.
absolutely.
But if you have something that even in the most minute way that you perceive it to be, that can at least help you to a degree of just understanding yourself better, I don't think anything like that is not of value.
No, because it'll help you having more awareness of what the external world. It'll bring some sort of order to what sometimes feels like a chaotic external world.
Mm,
So If
Yeah.
you have a little bit of awareness around your patterns and programs and behavior and expectations is a big one, I think. Because another thing you touched on it, people taking things personally, well, resilience isn't always so some people learn resilience from family, particularly the father. In terms of if the father's always that's why they say it's quite good for fathers to be fighting with children and things like that. Children and I mean play fighting, like wrestling and things like that, because children sort of they have that ability to sort of learn that through, trying, getting up and failing. It can be done in a really healthy way. But if it's not done in a healthy way in the environment, then when you get out into the real world, you won't necessarily have it. It's something that you're going to have to learn through the school of hard knocks when you get out
Mm.
into the. Yeah. And so people can take a lot of hits because resilience isn't necessarily something you don't necessarily just get born with resilience. It's something that can be taught, as I say, in a healthy way. But I think that can be missing as well a lot of the time.
Yeah, absolutely. I think resiliency is a big piece, and I want to circle back to expectations in a second. But with resiliency, I read a book probably last year. It was called The Fourth Pillar. I can't even remember who it was written by, but he's an Australian psychologist slash ex SAS soldier. It's a phenomenal book. It touches a little bit more on bridging the gap between philosophy and just all the other more well-known variables within our lives. So, and he sort of mentions that like everybody's understanding of resiliency is the ability to get back up and return to homeostasis, return to the same place they were. But where a lot of people miss the mark on resiliency is you never actually return back to the same place because you've always
Mm,
improved, you've always
mm.
evolved. And it's similar to, I can't even, this is a very famous old quote. I can't even remember who said it, but a man will never visit the same river twice because for he is not the same man and it is not the same river.
Yeah, I love that.
And that in itself, I would love to say that that's Seneca or Epictetus or someone like that. I'm pretty sure it is one of those people. But that in itself kind of represents that we're ever evolving as human beings. And a lot of people will always look at the positives, you know, the things they're better at now. But a lot of the times they miss the mark on like, okay, well, are you actually able to tolerate difficult situations better? Are you able to tolerate hard conversations better? Do you take things less personally than you did before? Do you have a greater ability and understanding to sit there and take a step back and go, okay, well, this person's actually coming at me a little bit aggressively, but that's not probably directed at me. Maybe I'll try and see why they're coming at me in that direction
Yeah.
and try and diffuse the situation instead of continue to push it. I think that that's a really underappreciated value that people can actually adapt is like that the personality side of things and the emotional awareness, the emotional regulation, the ability to get back to that place of groundedness quicker.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. And I do think I just keep coming back to, a really healthy relationship with your father. He understands that. He understands that if you have a few knocks in the house in terms of healthy kind of, is that your dog?
Yeah. Did you hear that?
No, I didn't. I just saw your face. I'm like,
Oh,
what's he doing?
he's woken up from his nap and he's decided to groan at me because I must have woken him up by talking too loud.
How dare you?
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Yeah, so a healthy father understands that. I think my dad had a bit of an understanding of that in a way. Like they know that if you take a few knocks at home, because obviously as a child coming up against a man, you have that ability to sort of play around, play fight a little bit. He understands he's got to give you some, but you've also got to be aware of where the boundary is with it a little bit. And so he understands that if you experience that within the house, when you get older, you've already started that process. That okay, I'm going to come back. I know that I'm going to take knocks because I know that's going to happen, but I'm going to understand that if I do, that'll help me learn. And then I can,
Mm,
as exactly you hit the nail on the head in terms of that. It's like you come back better
yeah.
with more information.
Yeah, I really like that. Another way, like even just utilizing my own experiences with that is like my dad, very athletic based. Everything that he did to teach me, to keep and showing up was all through athletic endeavors. So whether it was he would race me in the park, and there were sometimes he'd let me win, and then other times he would smoke me. Or we'd go to the roller rink. Roller skating was actually a really big thing for us as kids. Speed skating, roller hockey, all the rest of it. And at the start, he'd kind of let me win sometimes. And then other times he would just obliterate me to show me and be like, hey, you need to take this because it's going to help you to be better. And sure enough, what it did was make me be better because I was now chasing him and I'd go faster or I'd be able to handle, turns or delegating around other people or whatever the case might have been. And they're the little things that you don't necessarily even think about much when you're a kid. You just think, oh, dad beat me again, like beat me in a race again, beat
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
But hearing you explain it in that way, I've never really thought about it to that degree. Is like that was actually, yeah, that was teaching me resiliency in such a different way to how
Yeah.
you would think it would be perceived normally. Because we do think about like it's the school of hard knocks. You can only learn resiliency by really bad things happening to you. It's like, well, my dad beating me in roller skating is probably not the worst thing that could happen to me as a kid. Like it's
Well, that's what I mean in terms of there can be healthy ways to learn this. Like I remember my dad. My dad's a big guy who's like 6 foot, and I remember being really little, and he let me. I feel like he let me. At the time, he didn't say this, but he let me kick him off a bed once, and he completely fell off the bed. And I do feel like he allowed that because for him, he just innately knew it's important for that to because when you're then playing out in the big world, it's a much bigger league. So there does need and as I say, a healthy father understands that not to, but that is also where you do need to understand your child a little bit more, because if you have a very sensitive child, it needs to be done in a different way than if you had a really fiery competitive child. So this is
mm,
where it still is important to understand your child in that respect of knowing how to deal with the fall, deal with the loss, because one child might take it really hard and then they need a safe space to be. The other child might be like, well, you've just pushed me harder. Like so this is where we do need that awareness. It's not that it doesn't still have to happen, but we do have to make sure that we do still have a safe space for the child to if they do have a loss in the skating rink, to have that safe space afterwards that they can experience that with. So I
yeah,
think
absolutely.
that's where knowing your child in a little bit more detail is also important.
Yeah, I really like that. I really like that a lot. I wanted to circle back on expectations and
Yeah.
primarily we'll look at it through the lens of relationships, and I'm talking relationships with partners, things like that, because I think that that's a really, really big one. Obviously, it affects all our relationships with our parents, with our friends, with our workers, employees, staff, whatever you might have. I know for a fact, and this is just looking at things through my own lens personally, I would have had less issues in some of my relationships had our expectations been able to be better clarified and discussed. And I'm sure I'm not alone in that. I'm sure there's so many people listening to this can be like, yeah, that's
Yeah. Yeah. Communication, right? Communicate. But it's also, here's and the biggest thing in what we're touching on today, sometimes we don't know where these things are coming from. And we've heard so much now, people saying, when you have an argument over the fact he didn't take the bin out, it's not about the fact that he didn't take the bin out. We're starting to hear that a lot more. And so, I mean, our partner's going to be one of the biggest people that we're going to play these patterns and programs out. And there is going to be remnants from childhood. There is going to be things in terms of what you're playing out with mum and dad and this kind of thing that comes into it as well. And that is the purpose of it in a lot of ways, is to really help. But, firstly, knowing yourself is such a key to that, because as you just mentioned with expectations, knowing your own expectations, where they're coming from, knowing your own patterns, your own fears, and being able to express that, which is not a small thing. It really
mm,
isn't. And we all know that. It's not a small thing when you're in a heightened situation in your relationship and you're able to stop and say, hey, I'm actually really scared right now. Or like this is taking me back. I'm feeling really uncomfortable with this. Or what you'll probably see is two people just still fighting it out, So when you actually start to understand where things are coming from, and then where your outer expressions are coming from, that then gives a bit more of the ability to communicate that with somebody. And I mentioned before, even basic things, like you might have a partner that processes things emotionally. So as soon as something happens, they're going to feel it, and they're going to come from that
Mm.
space. You might have the other partner is coming from a space of purely logic. We see this so much, right? In terms of,
Yeah.
so it's like, I don't want logic right now. I just want you to be with me in this moment. You know, I don't need a lecture on X, Y, and Z. I just need somebody to sit with me in this moment. And
Yeah.
that's a
No,
pattern
absolutely.
that you're playing out time and memorial in terms of relationships. And I know some friends that one of my friends, he'll say to his partner, "Do you want a solution, or do you just want me to be here with you in this moment?"
I like
So
that. That's really cool.
yeah, it's community. So sometimes we're also fixers. Like some of us are fixers as well. So it's as soon as you're hearing something, you just want to straight away fix the problem. But it's
Yeah.
becoming aware of what that person needs in that moment as well.
100%. I think it's important to understand with that too. There's probably times, and I know for a fact there's been times where I've been both people, or there's been times where I have wanted to just like not wanted to listen to logic or be talked down to or whatever. Just need someone to just sit and be with. And there's been other times where I have come at things from a more logical perspective and tried to offer solutions to problems that I may have actually overlooked. That you know they're saying it's X, but it's actually Y, and all they need is you to just be there as a partner. I do
Yeah.
believe that by diving deeper into myself over the journey, it's definitely aided me in that and being able to sometimes quite literally asking. This is such a fucking undervalued thing. Ask someone else what they need. Ask your partner, what is it you need from me in this moment? That's can be
Yeah,
such a hard question for somebody to ask. That person may not have the perfect solution. They might not even have an answer in that moment. They might look at you and go, I don't know, but that's okay. Because then you can figure it out together.
absolutely. And that's and y- because the challenging thing when you're in a relationship is you're both so desperate to get your point across. But there will be some moments in your relationship where you're actually able to step back and see their pattern. So for example, their fear in this moment. And you might not, it's not always good to say, well, you're doing this because of this. I know that you're behaving this way because your mum left when you were 3. It's stepping back and going, oh, okay, this might not necessarily be about me. And just having that is one of the hardest things to do as a partner. But when you become more aware and also keeping in mind somebody who's very mind focused and tends to process through the mind, they might struggle in terms of if someone's quite emotional, they might feel it feels heavy for them. So
Mm.
their initial reaction might be to take a step back because for them it's very heavy. They also need to learn and become aware of what's needed from them in that moment as well. So if you can work that out with your partner and know that, okay, her first reaction or his first reaction is emotion straight away, and I know that I usually come from a very logical or an intelligence perspective, then that gives you an opening. And ultimately we're here to learn from each other.
Mm.
So so there might be something in that moment that is being taught to you in terms of perhaps learning to feel into something more.
Yeah, absolutely. I think there's lessons in everything we do, and everything we've kind of discussed literally just comes back to your almost your opening statement about just finding self better, seeking within,
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
just learning who we are, learning who you are as a person is scary, but also so enlightening.
It is. It's not easy. It's not an easy journey, but you can get into a stage that it then becomes exciting when you have moments of like, you know, of a change of perception. When it could be anything. I remember having a really big moment of perception shift when I was just sitting on top of a mountain one day and I just went, okay, I get it, you know. And it can it and then you start to become more, and the more you become aware, the more moments like that you'll have.
Mm.
You know,
You, you mentioned within this, and talk about it as much as you like or as little as you like,
yeah,
that something that helped you along your journey a lot was plant medicine.
yes,
It is something that has probably seen an exponential shift in the last 10 years, 10 to 15 years. People, it obviously used to be very heavily bad, bad, bad. This is all horrible. Like you're a bad person. If you do all this stuff, you go into prison for the rest of your life, whatever. And now it's starting to become more and more accepted with the legalization of everything, even just CBD oils and things like that. There was a period a few years back where I was experiencing such bad anxiety every single day. The only thing that helped was CBD oil.
mm,
I tried every other supplement, fucking prescription. I was given medication because I couldn't stop throwing up from how anxious I was daily. And I dropped about 10 kilos in 3 weeks.
oh gosh,
The only thing that fixed it was CBD oil
yeah,
that allowed me to then get back to a space where I was able to work through the rest of what was happening with my psychologist at the time and go through that process and things like that. But give a little bit of an insight into your thoughts around all of this. And when you say plant medicine, do you just mean, cannabis, or is it mushrooms or these type of things as well?
yeah. So I've done a couple of different methods. I've been really lucky with my experiences. I've been in very safe, and the people that I've met are just phenomenal people, and they've always held a really safe space because there is a stigma as anything becomes more popular and happens more in it becomes, you go to a friend's house and sort of do it and things like this. So I always say that I feel like it does need to be done in a safe space. That's sort of the caveat that comes with that. But it just really opened me up to, I mentioned seeking at the start. It was like it showed me sort of all of these. It helped me to understand the way that I was feeling, and it was essentially that brought me to astrology. Really, it actually I was able to sense the bigger picture in all, in in everything. So it's been like there's so much you could say about it. But again, I'm very cautious in these things to just say these are all tools, and a big mentor of mine has always been Ram Dass. And it's just being very aware that they're tools. They're something to use on your path, but they're not the path. And
Mm,
I guess just wanting to make a few caveats before I talk about it, because I think it's important to speak on that. But as far as my journey is concerned, it certainly opened me up a lot more to the bigger picture. Yeah, in terms of the connections that we have not just to ourselves but to others. Everybody has very different experiences on plant medicine, but the one thing that seems to come out of it is you start to realize you're not so separate to everybody else.
mm, that oneness.
That oneness and, yeah, the connection, not just to ourselves but to the earth too. And I always sort of see astrology as a bit like that because astrology is sort of like a holistic view. So it's like your own ecosystem. And that has been very helpful in terms of plant medicine because although humans have taken themselves out of nature, they're still subject to the laws of nature. the cycles, the changes. We're still very cyclical beings in terms of what time we go to bed, wake up, like night,
Mm.
day, months, years, you know, weeks. We're very cyclical. We just haven't quite cottoned on to what exactly that means in terms of the bigger picture.
Absolutely. It's as human beings, we are, time, and this people gonna some people will think this sounds crazy. Time is a
It's
construct.
going off on
It's
a
something we've created. Time isn't real. For anyone at home, time isn't a real thing. It doesn't exist. It's something we created as human beings. They created it as a means of trying to keep a record, a track of something.
Yeah.
If we look at everything from our human nature, we respond to sunlight. Our circadian rhythm is based upon sunlight. We as human beings essentially photosynthesize. Without vitamin D, we disintegrate internally. And that is, if someone wants to believe in the woo woo or the not, they want to believe in full science. If we do not get enough vitamin D, our bones become brittle. A lot of our internal aspects stop working. Biologically, we start to shut down.
Hmm.
The more you look at and understand that, and the more you realize that, like, if we respond to the sun and fresh air and water and being out in nature, and I don't think there's a single person in this world who can say that they do not feel better by just going out into nature for a little bit, whether that's sitting at the beach, going for a hike, going for a walk, going to see a. There's nothing more beautiful in this world than seeing a waterfall in nature.
Yeah. Yeah.
No one can disagree with that. Look at the greatest wonders of the world. Like, it's a lot of stuff to do with nature. Like, we are as humans instinctively designed to want to
Drawn
go and
to it.
seek those things.
Drawn to it. And I think it's because and nature teaches us a lot about cycles because we've become so comfort driven in our society. But nature will tell you that everything is part of a cycle: death, birth, decay, growth. So that what does that tell us in terms of humans? It's that it's not always going to be a comfortable ride, and that we do sometimes have to go through really difficult times that make us feel like we are literally, becoming, you know, some situations that you'll go through. It's like I don't feel like there's anything left. Like that was such a hard situation. I just feel like I've been completely, you know, there's a shell, but that then gives you the ability to regrow. And if we pay
Mm,
attention to those clues, then we start to understand. And also, I always think with astrology, on the planet there's nothing in nature that's not of use. Everything's been designed in a perfect order. Whether you agree with that or not, I know that's not always agreed with by people, but we're no different. If we look at it from that perspective, we have been put here as part of nature to play in that bigger sphere. So I
mm.
see every person as like, every bee, every flower, every tree. Humans are no different in that. It's just how we choose to go on that journey with the
Yeah,
materials we
absolutely. In the ecosystem we're provided.
in yeah, and with the materials we were given essentially. But I also don't downplay that it can be a hard road, but it's something that can be quite profound if you decide to go on it, essentially.
Yeah, the journey within. It's
Yeah.
yeah, it's something I've always said is there's like you will never ever regret working on yourself. And you touched on it almost in your opening statement about how we tend to externalize everything. We're always looking for the next adventure, the next thing, the next trip, holiday, house, car, next, 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 next. Like we achieve one thing and then it's like, cool, what's next? What's next?
Yeah.
And so many people turn a blind eye to looking internally to figure out what's next for them inside. To
Yeah,
just
because it's sort of Oh, sorry.
no, you
Yeah.
go. Yeah, you go.
Yeah, because when you first start that path, it is to first start it is difficult, and we do think that the external will replace that for us. So we do think that, and we are also taught to achieve externally in this society as well. It is a pattern. I see things a little bit differently in that respect. I see that the individual represents the collective represents the individual. So we've had a hand in creating that. So we can also
Mm,
come back from that if we want to, but we would need to make some changes in our own personal lives as well.
absolutely. I think that's kind of what we both alluded to, right, with the relation to the school stuff. It's like teachers can't know emotional regulation if they're not taught it from a young age, and they can't then continue to teach that to others. So that cycle does start at the base level, but also at the top level. It's like we, as humans, as adults, like, you're never too late to start, I don't think, is a big thing.
No, I don't think so.
People,
And in fact, oh, sorry, you go.
no, I was just going to say, people go through their lives, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60 years, and they're so afraid to, to change any aspects of themselves that they're just not willing to.
And one thing I was sort of shown with that as well is it can also be about the fact that once you become a parent, it is challenging to look further because there's now children involved in that. So there can be a bit more of an added difficulty and really wanting to go further into that because now you're also seeing that the effects that might have happened with children. But I don't think it's like you said, I don't think it's ever too late to start. I think that can be the hesitant with parents. I think it's always like, I have many conversations with people that are like, I wish my mum or my dad would just see what happened, or I could have at least a conversation with them, but they're not open to it because there's a lot more history there now as well. There's a lot more to dive into. Of course, it will be of great benefit, but there is sometimes that fear, and I think the older that you get and the less that you're wanting to dive into it, the fear sort of continues to, and
Mm.
also just being happy to eventually live in a state of comfort maybe, or just,
Ignorance.
um, yeah, just to
The saying, ignorance is bliss.
yeah, I think, and I use the word external comfort because I think that's what it is. I think it's external
Mm,
comfort, not necessarily internal comfort.
100%. I attended Modern Wisdom Live at the start of this year with Chris Williamson, and one of the audience members said, straight up, their question was, is ignorance bliss? And his response was, the fact of asking that questions means you'll never find out. And I was like,
Okay.
wow, okay. Because the fact, like, obviously being ignorant is to disillude yourself from other aspects of things. And that's, I'm not using this in a negative connotation either, because there can be some people who are quite literally ignorant because they've never had an experience in their life that has needed them to actually show up in a particular way in one situation or another. But as we do start to evolve, and the people who do go on the journey of looking internally and looking at themselves, they'll never truly be able to understand what it means to be ignorant again, because once you start to dive deeper, and again, this is another philosophical quote, but the more you realize, the more you learn, the more you realize you don't know.
Huh. Mm.
There's always something
Correct.
else.
Correct. And so when I was very young, I was very black and white, very black and white. And the older I get, the less black and white things are for me. I I rarely take, and in society likes stands, right? You're either with us or you're against us. We're seeing this much more in American politics than ever right now. So society likes you to take stands on things. But once you get older and you start to go through experiences and you start to dive into things, you realize that there's multiple concepts of one thing.
Mm.
And you realize that there's multiple ways something can be viewed, and that you also sometimes don't have all of the information. And so it is that ability. I mean, of course, there's some things that you don't move in, certain values, certain things that you believe are right or wrong. if that's the way we want to say it. But there are often, we do sometimes want to see people standing on one side. But I think what this world needs right now is multiple concepts, understanding of multiple concepts, and understanding where one person can be standing and the other person can be standing, and, holding that, simply holding it and being aware of it. And I think that's what going into particularly plant medicine and astrology, and, because another big thing with astrology is it's also what you're expecting to see. So you're going to be a lot more aware when someone's behaving in a way that you expect them. You may not notice the parts of them that are not behaving in that way because that's what you're expecting to get. So
Uh,
that one can be a tricky one for people to accept in that, because it's, I need you to play a role for me in this moment. I need you to play that role so I can work through that at that time. We all know when we catch projections from people. But just being, and as I say, going back to just being able to not be so hard-lined on things and understand that
mm,
you may not the bigger picture.
yeah. Yeah, I think that's definitely something that I've adapted to over time as well. I think a lot of people are very, very black and white in the way in which they think, and I've
Mm,
always thought myself to be, and we discussed this last week, like I've always said I've felt different. Like I felt, a little bit like an outsider for a majority of my life because I've never necessarily seen everything as black and white, and I'm always willing to listen to other people's perspectives, although I may not necessarily agree with them. I will always listen because there could be something that someone says that although I don't agree with what they say, it teaches me a new way as to why they think that way.
yeah,
And the more I can expand my mind on being able to understand why somebody thinks the way they do, not just necessarily what they think, has opened more conversations, more doors, and more ability to learn for the future than anything else I've ever done.
yeah, yeah. I think it's huge. I think if you're able to, because there's safety in polarity, right? There's the, the sort of the tribalism mentality of, if I take a stand, then I'll belong to something. I'll belong to a group, or I'll belong to, a movement or opinions of something. It'll keep me safe. So there is a safety in that. But yes, to step outside of that, it will open your, ability to see things from other perspectives and meet different people and just, get a bigger picture.
Absolutely. And yeah, it all just comes back to being able to learn yourself better.
Yeah. Yeah. I definitely think that that is the start. And yeah, and then you start to see how you relate with other people and also fit into that bigger picture as well.
Mm. Yeah, honestly, anybody, I know that majority of the people who do listen to this podcast and have listened up into this point, they'll already have been all on their own individual journeys, very similar to this, which I love, which I do love. I love the fact that the people who tune in that I talk to, they're just like, they're on their own journeys and they implement things that I've discussed and they go and look at different aspects. And I've had people who disagree with the things I talk about on here. And I'm
Oh,
like,
absolutely.
but you're still
Yeah.
listening. You're still listening. But it's
Which
great.
which
It's great that they're listening.
absolutely. It
It gives
it
me
is.
perspective. It gives them perspective.
Yeah, and I think that because we are like that a little bit, aren't we? If someone says one thing we don't like, it's like not listening to them anymore. But
That's
but we
that's a big one.
we well, it's come because we're almost trying to find. It feels like, we went through that big guru era, right? So it's like we were looking for people outside of ourselves to, and it seems like now the journey is to be looking in more inward, which interestingly is often what the gurus were teaching. But yeah, it can very much be, if I don't agree with that one statement, I'm completely throwing that person, and that comes from that sort of, it either has to be all right or it's completely wrong
Mm,
mindset.
yeah. Again, look, that could be a fault of school. something we're taught instinctively from there's a right, wrong answer for everything, and there's no black and white, there's no open to interpretation, or it's open to the teacher's interpretation, but if they interpret it slightly differently to how you interpret it, then you're wrong and they're right. It's like,
Yeah, because one of the, some of the greatest teachers were sort of but again, it depends on the kid, doesn't it? Because some kids would love that kind of thinking as well, because as I mentioned before, there's a safety in that kind of thinking. Some
mm,
people will prefer that. It's you tell me what, or I'll work out what the majority is thinking because there's a safety in that. So that's another journey in itself, is if there is that kind of mentality of, well, it's either all all has to be right or it's completely wrong, then that is an opening as well.
mm, for sure,
There
I
is a
like
power.
that. Yeah, that's cool. I like this. Yeah, honestly, I think that kind of beautifully ties everything together in the sense that everything comes back to ourselves.
Mm.
The more you seek within yourself, the better you'll be able to stand. So, the other saying, as within, so without.
Mhm.
The
As
better you
above, so
can,
below.
yeah, that you are able to understand, the better you're able to show up in the world. And I think if we have more open-minded people, it will genuinely just benefit everyone as a collective.
Yeah, I think so, and just also being patient with people, like I think I always come from a place of, when I was a lot younger in my 20s and things like that, and I wasn't so open. In a way, I'm glad that I had that experience because now I can understand other people in that experience as well and why it might feel scary. And so just being more patient with each other,
Mm.
more, and as we were just talking about, more open with each other, and just there's no right nor wrong in terms of, if you have one mentality versus another, it's just everyone's on their own journey. I think that's probably the biggest message that I would like, even though, as I said with astrology, there's no good or bad birth charts. There's no good or bad planets in a birth chart. There just is, you know. So it's just that's probably the biggest message that I would want to get out and people on this journey.
Unless you got Jupiter in the 12th, then that's good.
Then you're a legend.
Exactly. I've done so much research on that in the last week. That one that is like, yeah, been crazy, which
Yeah.
we can talk about externally this. But
Yeah, I
yeah, I
love
think
that
that
you're doing
that's
this.
it's really cool. Where can people find you
Well,
if anyone
I'm
wants
on
to find more
Instagram.
information out?
Yeah, yeah. So I'm on Instagram. I also have so my business is called Dharma Space, and I have an Instagram. I also have a website. So they're welcome to contact me through any means. If they have any questions, I'm happy to even answer questions around plant medicine if there's something that they've been wanting to know for a long time. I know there's often questions around that. And obviously if they have any questions around astrology or birth charts, more than happy just to, as I say, answer any questions that people have.
Perfect. I'll link all of that in the description as well. And when I throw it up on Instagram, it'll be collabed as always. So you will be able to find everything you need. But before we wrap up, I've got 3 questions I ask every guest. So strap in.
Okay.
They're not actually that bad. I make it sound way worse than they think. They've got to build up the anticipation, right?
Yeah, yeah. Thanks. Thanks.
First one. If you could tell your younger self one thing, what would it be?
I feel like this is going to be super cliche, but it's all going to be okay.
Good. I love that.
Yeah.
Cliches make the best. Like cliches are the best for everything. Everybody wants to overlook cliches, but like that is generally that's how
Yeah,
it is.
it is. Yeah,
If you're
just
going to
give
surmise
your
it.
young self a hug, that
Hmm.
it's all right. Yeah.
Question number 2. What's your
Mhm.
favorite animal and why?
My dog, and she's just here, Dusty. She's a red cattle dog. She's the best thing ever.
Okay, cool. I love that.
It's easy.
Uh, Yeah, no, that's so easy. I love because that question, funnily enough, this has been something very, very interesting. I think you'd probably like it. I have found that the answer a lot of people give is almost in a roundabout way the way in which they see themselves. With some of
Interesting.
the animals people have given, It's like what, and I always ask, like I ask why someone likes that animal, and then they start to elaborate. And it's like, okay, cool. I can understand why now. It's because you can kind of see synchronicities between yourself and that animal, or it might just be like the most random answer possible just because they're given it.
I didn't really understand the assignment though, did I? You meant like overall
No,
arching,
that's
like
that's perfect. If someone asked me that question, I would say Sammy. Like I've not got some big, like crazy, wildly elusive answer that's, a silverback because they're noble and like what?
a
No,
wolf.
Sammy, because he's cute and he wears little jumpers and sighs at me if I make too much noise while he's sleeping, and then snores. He snored so loud while I was working the other day that you could hear him on my client feedback I was giving. I was like, this is perfect. Thank you, Samuel. I'm glad that I'm paying the bills, you little freeloader.
The main thing is that he's comfortable, right?
Exactly. Oh, absolutely. That's why he's got two beds in the office and he can sleep wherever he wants. And he's got a jumper on. But last but not least, what does strength mean to you?
Mm. I think the ability to go into yourself and see what what might be coming up for you, instead of doing that. And I
Perfect.
don't mean that in any judgmental way, because I do that myself, but I just mean it in, I think it takes strength to be able to ask what this moment is asking of you.
I love it. That's amazing.
Mm.
It's a great answer. I think yeah, genuinely, that ties everything together just beautifully. So, once again, I can't thank you enough for your time today. I know
I
everybody
think you
who has
much.
listened will take a great deal of value from this. And speaking truthfully, anybody who is interested in astrology, spirituality, anything we've discussed today, go and talk to Meghan, book in a call, chat, talk, and find out more about yourself. Because, as I said, when I did the birth chart reading, and I'm a fairly open minded person, but it genuinely blew my mind as to some of the things that we covered, and I cannot recommend it enough.
Thank you. Thank you so
Yes,
much,
thank you.
Josh. That's awesome.
Thank you for tuning in today, everybody. I will catch you on the next one.